it's time to fucking record. All right, so I guess this is part 2, and we get to talk about Ben's video he did. This was in what year? 95, 4-ish?
95 or 96.
You could tell
maybe.
by the shorts he's wearing. It had to have been.
Thanks.
It had to be in it.
Thanks.
His cock and balls are almost hanging out.
Nick likes my ass.
Yeah, dude, it looked good.
It's all that prison time he had earlier in life.
I want that shit pushed in, bro. I watched this video. I a couple guys told me about it, and I'm like, they're like, dude, you got to watch this fucking video. So I bugged Ben a couple times, and I'm like, I got to check this out. So I watched it. I'm like, it's a fucking great video. Very informative. And no one was doing it at the time. And you guys break down everything. Everything.
Yeah, no one was doing it at the time. And I think the whole premise of the whole deal is we were doing a lot of videos with Mike Folks. Mm-hmm. And it was a lot of stuff from marlin fishing to whatever else. And it was just local stuff. And then that Calico Bass thing showed up, and we started winning some Calico Bass tournaments, and then we won that really big one. And when we won the really big one, he filmed all of us catching these fish, right? So it was like, hey, this is the time we do a how-to Calico Bass video. And I was like, okay. So what it was me and Stoats figured it out, and I sort of wrote like a script on how we were going to do what we were going to do, and we talked to Anglers Center, and they said it was fine to do it in there.
Oh, is that
after
where you did
hours.
it at?
We did it at Anglers Center.
Damn, dude.
That's the old Anglers Center from the 90s. So the rest is history. But it's like we were, we just did a previous part when we were talking about Matt and Swimbaits. I knew what I was doing because I did it every day. It's the same thing he was doing every single day. Every day after work, and we talked about this before, I'd get off of work at 3:30, didn't have a girlfriend, didn't care about the chicks. I'd take my 15-foot Gregor, launch it at the dunes, and go fish for calicos, and I was the only boat out there. So I did that for like 3 years, and then people started gaining interest in it. And the weirdest thing, as we were talking earlier, is what you don't know. It's like the unknown is one of these things that you have to know. So the only way to figure out the unknown is to go figure it out, right? Mm-hmm. So I went out there the first time, and I was fishing 12-pound. I got reamed. So then I went out there the next time, and I fished 15, and that's where musky sticks, like there was no saltwater bass rods. All the bass rods, no matter what you looked at, was all really light, because what were we doing? We're fishing worms. Even a jig rod was too light for doing that. Mm-hmm. So we went to the musky rods, and I found some musky rods from Kunan and some from Fenwick, and started.
Were you
fishing.
really doing research? Like, were you
going?
Oh, dude,
I was doing research. I went as far back when we were doing that. I tagged 500 Calico Bass. And did it with Floyd tags that I bought myself from Washington. And in those days, it cost me $200 for whatever. And I bought them. And I went to Al Kalin, who was like a big sponsor of mine. Yeah. And I was like, Al, how can we get these people to return the tags? Because I was doing this at AFCO for tuna. I had started that tuna tagging program. Mm-hmm. So then what we did is Al made up packets. So anybody that returned a Floyd tag to Kalin was sent a Calico Bass packet. And that's how we started figuring out all these fish that I tagged, if they lived in a spot or if they traveled at all. And what we found is that most of the fish that I was tagging on hard bottom spots or in the rocks, they lived there all their lives. Mm-hmm. And there was a lot of fish that I was tagging. I was tagging fish in kelp that didn't live there. So the kelp fish were like migratory. They'd move around a little bit. But those fish that were on stones or hard bottoms and stuff like that, they stayed there. So we learned a whole bunch of stuff, and I handed it over to DFG, and Crook had it. And it was something that, like, when you go to a certain spot in your life and you want to know as much as you can know, because we never know it all, mm-hmm. We knew a lot back then, and you knew all about how to catch those fish.
Yeah. And that video, you do a pretty good, I mean, just even watching you pull out 9-pounders, like big fish, really you know?
Yeah,
It's crazy. And the bend in those rods too, and the way you guys are setting the hooks, and it's like just something different.
Yeah.
What I mean, you start pretty much on your line. So at the time, what line were you, the size comparable today, like the line you're
Okay,
using?
remember back then there was Stren and Trilene and Maxima, right? And all I used was Maxima. So what I learned is that 12 pound was perfect because 12 was 15. 15 was like 20, maybe 19, whatever, and 17. So I used 12, 15, and 17. And people go, you're not using 20. And I'm like, I am using 20. I'm like using 25 and you don't know it. But that line back then, we were sponsored by Maxima. So we could use the line and then just, get rid of it and keep on changing the line. 12 pound I used primarily when we were fishing kelp because I didn't have problems with holding fish in kelp. You could land big fish in kelp.
Yeah.
When you went to stone fishing, you were fishing 15 as the light got a lot lower. So if I was fishing early in the morning, because the key times were like you were fishing tidal fish, you were fishing incoming tides, and you would mark them out. I think we talked about this before.
Yeah.
I had a tide book, and I marked every day I was going to fish in this tide book. And then I'd go through and take days off around it if I needed to on really good tides or work half a day or whatever. But low light, incoming tides, and I was on it. I was always doing it. And back then when we were doing it, we didn't have foot control trail motors. So it was sort of hairball.
Everything was what, tiller?
It was tiller, and one guy was driving the boat and another guy was casting. And a lot of times if there wasn't a lot of surge, then it was okay. But, I think in my head one time where Greg and I were fishing, it was a big south swell, and I wasn't paying attention, and we had like a solid 10-foot face behind it. And he goes, go for the shoulder. And I'm driving this thing as fast as I could, but I didn't look at the shoulder, and I went right over the peak of this wave. And I took my little boat, and it was like airborne, like 6 feet in the air, and landed on the bottom. And he just looked at me like, man, you're crazy. And I'm like, no, I just couldn't get to the shoulder. I was afraid. So what it did is it taught us a lot of stuff. It taught us a lot about how the fish would react to baits in different times of the year, how the fish would react to baits in different places where you're fishing. But it mostly taught me a lot about how to be safe with everything. Don't end up with a hook in your buddy's head. Don't drown 2 people in your boat. So you learn a lot of stuff. But the other thing that did is Stoats and I actually would get small, like 15 and 16 foot Valcos and Gregors and customize them. So we'd cut out the center seat, put a Marquis tank in the center seat, and plumb them so that those little boats, when we would catch really, really big fish, we would stick them in the tanks and find places and take pictures of them. So we had some really nice pictures of a lot of nice fish, but in those days there was no one fishing them. It was us, and there was John. God, I can't think of his name, but John was fishing them. There was like 3 or 4 boats, and always the old man was fishing them. So I used to see him a lot everywhere, but we were able to catch a whole bunch of fish. And for me, the thing that was cool is like, Matt was talking about his stuff with the video with me. I always had Rich Holland with me. So if I caught a big one, Rich Holland took a picture of it. And all of them were weighed on Delaire scales. And people don't even know what Delaire scales are. Like, it's a Chatillon scale that is literally, back in the old days, you could get them IGFA, IGFA approved, so you could weigh fish on them. Wow. And if you did it, on the beach, it was great. But we had a lot of big fish weighed on that, and it was really fun.
Yeah, and I mean, even the breakdown you get when you're breaking the tackle down, the lead heads you're using.
The lead heads we poured ourselves.
Yeah, which is
cool.
Now
you got Afrin that's making the best lead head on the map. That you're not going to snag fish. Yeah. You're not going to snag the bottom, but you're going to get most of the bites that you have.
You had no weedless then, right?
No weedless, and the ones that we did, we used the old flipping weedless that had like a different head on it. It looked like a bug head on them.
Okay.
And I got those from Suakawa, who used to make haddock lures.
Okay.
And he was in I think he's still around even, but he was down there in Pedro.
You were using that for would that work pretty well, or would you just say I'd rather use
No.
it?
Actually, you know what we use those for? We use those a lot with magambos.
Okay.
We fished magambos. We caught a lot of really big fish on magambos, and the wildest thing that ever happened to me was when owner came up with those. The owner came up with jig hooks, and no one would pour them, and me and Stoat started grabbing them and pouring them. Mm-hmm. And we finally talked Al Kalin into pouring chemically sharpened hooks, and that was the start of. Kalin did a lot of. He had a lot of firsts that people don't know about, and it was all based off of us doing our backyard stuff.
Yeah, you're pretty much making everything except pouring baits.
Yeah,
were you pouring baits too?
No, that's something we didn't do. We first guy to give us or show us baits was Marv Benelin. Mm-hmm. And before Marv Benelin, it was Sassy Shads and stuff like that. And then I met Gary Brown from Fish Traps, and he's the one that turned me on to fish traps. And then Barry Breitenberg got fish traps, and that's pretty much the history of the baits that we used. But what we did is we went from fishing 3-inch to 4-inch to 5-inch to 6-inch to 7s to 9s.
Yeah.
And we made some big, and then we'd trap hook some of them, for really... if we were getting driven crazy by smaller hook fish. So
yeah. And were you fishing spotties too?
Yeah, we started fishing spotties. We started
after or before?
Before. We fished spotties way before. It was in the Fenwick tournament days, and then ABA had a spotty tournament, and Butch Chapman and Don Iovino won it. Mm-hmm. I'll never forget that stuff. But it was like we started the spotties. The spotties had us learn a lot about what was going on with spotty. The biggest spotty I think we ever caught back then was maybe 310. We had like one that was like 3 pounds, 10 ounces. And then with the spotty tackle is when we went outside to test the Calico waters.
Which was...
And we got destroyed. So then
were
we
you
started
tripping out when you did set a hook? You're like, what the fuck was that?
I'll never forget Stoatsbury just looking at me going, dude, what? And I'm like, dude, this is off the hook. We need to go back and regroup. And, Greg's always been forward thinker. So he was helping with a lot of stuff. And he was the one that first got us pouring our own lead heads. We were pouring bullet heads with owner hooks. And I'm telling you, the owner hooks, what we did back then that guys don't have to do so much now is we fished a stiff rod, but we had all monofilament. So we'd have to wind our rear end off to get all the stretch out of the monofilament to set the hook.
Which you can see in the video.
Yep. And the owner hooks helped because it took less pressure to get them in a fish's face.
Yeah. And that was new when you were just fishing, like it was.
Oh, I would go out on a limb and tell you that with us pouring, we were pouring, and probably other guys were pouring it, but no one offered it on the market. We were the only ones that had them.
And you were pouring the hooks.
We were pouring our own heads.
And then
with those hooks.
Okay. And then owner came out with the same.
They never did. It was a while longer after that.
Damn. So you've seen all this come, and
we've seen full circle.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, man.
Yeah.
It's crazy. And you weren't fishing Laguna then either, were you?
Oh yeah, we started fishing Newport and Corona del Mar, and we had like it was the same thing as a lake. You'd fish, hey, I got this one bank and it's full all the time. And then once you got past that, when we got into Laguna, I started messing with Laguna myself. And then I went from Laguna down, started fishing Dana Point, and went from Dana Point down and started fishing trestles, and, just started understanding more and more about it. And there's a big difference between fishing, Newport and Laguna than there is fishing Dana, because we don't have the same structure. And when they shut Laguna, they basically shut down the hog farm, because that's where most of the bigger fish were taken. So
what's the record?
14-7.
And that's where out of?
Newport, right in front of the harbor, right to the left in Corona del Mar.
Who holds that?
I don't know the guy's name. I was out there the day he caught it. He was hooping and hollering. He caught it on a mackerel, and he was in a rental boat and went in and weighed it and,
that's crazy.
Killed the booger, But it was a big fish. But, throughout the years, I had one fish that was 11.3, and then we had a fish. I had the weirdest night with Dave Pfeiffer where I was in the little skiff and he was in the front of the boat, and I was trying to fix a leak in the back of the boat. And he made one cast and he had a fish, and we weighed it, and it was upper 10s, so I gave it to him as a 10 on these scales. And it was a nice quiet night, so everything wasn't bobbing, but no matter what, if it's way over 10, then you get a 10-pounder.
Yeah.
Right? And then it was probably about 20 minutes later, and he caught a 13. He had one that was like 13.6. And I was like, oh my God, that's the biggest thing I've ever seen. And there's a picture in Sports Barber in Dana Point with Dave Pfeiffer holding this 13. I don't know where the other photos are. I took the photos years ago, but that's what we would do is we would fish, especially during the summer. We would fish because back then there was no offshore fishing. You were stoked if you caught a striped marlin or a couple of yellowtail. And we were always targeting, let's go make a shark fishing. And that was before threshers. Then the thresher thing, we figured that thing out. But the Calico Bass deal was like I said, we picked our nights. We knew where we were going to fish, and we'd fish from, 4 o'clock in the afternoon to 9 o'clock at night, just when you couldn't see anymore. And some of the best bites that you would get were just when it got dark, because no matter what, those things are nocturnal feeders. They eat octopus. They eat. I've caught them and they've had lobster in them, right? So they eat everything. Yeah. So it was like one of those deals where we really enjoyed those nighttime fishings. And what I remember most is, depending on where you're at, where you're running to. When I moved to Dana, we'd run, and the phosphorescence in the water at night was unbelievable.
You can see the fish come up and bite your bait.
Oh yeah, it was crazy. Dude, it was crazy.
So
that's crazy. What about your bag on that video? What size was it?
3708.
Was that one of the biggest bags for Calico?
That was the biggest one I know of.
Really?
Yeah.
How many people were in? Now, was that tournament all lures, or was it anything?
No, it was anything, but we fished strictly swim baits.
Yeah.
Yeah, to this day, I just got back from Seacrest, and everybody wanted to fish bait for the bigger ones. I want to fish surface iron. Oh, yo-yo, I don't want to fish bait half the time unless I have to.
Yeah.
Yeah,
and how many people would be in those tournaments in that back then?
That one, there was 44 teams.
Wow.
Then the next one was 41 teams, and the buy-in to those tournaments were, first place in that tournament was $13,000.
The one you won?
Yeah.
Jeez. Oh, shit.
Yeah.
So there was a big buy-in then.
Yeah. Yeah. Back then it was like the money that we won from that tournament started all the outside walls and everything else in my house that I bought in Dana. So that money was put to good use.
The wife was happy then.
Oh, super happy. But with those tournaments, that's what I learned is like, I fished the bass tournaments, the freshwater bass tournaments, and I saw a little bit of it, but I saw more of just just bad attitudes, bad sportsmanship with several people, and
in the freshwater
or in the saltwater. And then what I used to see a lot of times was just like they say, one rotten egg ruins a dozen or whatever. It would get pretty gnarly sometimes. So. And I'm talking about before SWBA. I mean, there used to be people that would go off and say things, and it just wasn't right. It didn't work. So we would listen to it. But then, as SWBA was in its infancy, I started fishing that with my buddy Al, and fished that for a couple years, and it was fun. But the hardest part is I left AFCO and didn't work there anymore. And the SWBA, I was working at Shimano, and I had to work for a living, right? I had to be places and do things. And before, when I was at AFCO, I had all the time in the world to fish. So I probably fished each week at least 5 days.
Oh, shit.
Strictly for calicos.
You feel like you could have done better if you were still working at AFCO
I think anybody can do better if they pre-fish. And Matt was talking about earlier with pre-fishing, you can't do anything unless you have the mind of the fish, and people don't understand. It's like when you fish all the time, I'm not going to say you think like a fish, but you can follow them and you track them and you see the differences and you see the small little things that are saying, okay, now you can get them, or this is what it's going to take on this. And when we fished all the time, I wasn't married, didn't have any kids, that pre-fishing was so important because I learned so much about it. Mm-hmm. So now what's funny is I'll pull up on spots still to this day, and I can look at them and I can read a spot because I spent all those years fishing, previously and looking at stuff. It doesn't change.
Yeah.
It doesn't change. I mean, what changes is basic. What's changing now is just the health of the resource. I mean, the Calico Bass fishing is nowhere near what it was before, and I'm not going to say it's hurt by any means. I was just spoiled.
Yeah. What about, I mean, the money in those tournaments? Why do you think you can't do that nowadays?
You know what? I think back then it was new and it was fun and it was something that was just crazy. Like I remember there was the Calico Bass tournament, there was Western Outdoor News tournaments all over the place. Then there was Western Outdoor News tournaments down in Ensenada, and they were all Calico based tournaments. And the focus on big bags was really cool, and it was fun. So we went from making like the promoters. Nowadays, you don't have promoters. Yeah. Right? You don't have a promoter. We had a guy that, Harvey, I can't think of his last name, but Harvey, who used to own Pacific Sport Fishing, he was the ones that would do it, and he would create big purses. And it was really cool to buy into a big purse, and if you got to win a big purse, it was something. Nowadays, guys don't want to do it, and the interest isn't there. You know, You don't have a guy promoting something. You have a guy that if he grabs it and he's going to do something, unlike Jerry Mayhew. Jerry Mayhew's awesome. Yeah. All right. But in the past, there was always guys trying to promote tournaments that wanted to make a certain amount of money off of promoting the tournament and making the tournament. Whereas you want to buy into something where you can win as much money as you can for something, or you can have a good payout down the road. It's just not the same.
Yeah. And that's, I guess, at the time and the age and social media. I fucking hate always blaming shit on social media, but I feel like it plays into the whole thing a little bit, you know? Right?
Yeah, social media, like back then, your secrets were secrets, and now if you have a secret and social media gets a hold of it, you have no secrets. That's what killed me, is by making that video. I gave everybody things that I was doing. Maybe they were doing a couple of things, but I gave them 10 things, and if they were doing 3 things, now they had 7 more things, and I created my own competition.
After that video,
I made good money on that video, but I created my own competition by giving the farm away, and all that information that I gave them wasn't like I learned it in a week. That was years of figuring it out. So
I guess maybe it hurt you, but I mean, it was a big jump for. Yeah. You know, same thing. Did you get shit on your video?
No, you mean like?
I mean, giving stuff away, like maybe that lake, because you did it on certain lakes where people like.
Yeah. I'm thinking about it. I think that the whole thing died off.
Really?
After it started dying off after us, and then we also at that point that video pushed us into the next level. So me, Sean, Justin, Dave was the only one that didn't want to do it. Paul, we all went pro.
Okay.
We were gone. We finally, we're out of here, you know, and we got to travel. So Casitas was winter. It was home. Yeah. But it wasn't like we were stressing because we weren't in the middle of it anymore. We thought we were moved on, you know? Yeah. So I'm obviously we told everyone how good the lake was. But then they stopped planting trout. It just died.
Which happened to a lot of the lakes now, right? I mean, most of the...
I mean, there's, there was that order put out that you can't put a trout in the lake, and that's been overturned, but GFG isn't really abiding by it. Yeah. They're like, well, here's 5 trout. That'll do. Like Casitas was getting stopped plant trout at trout plant at Casitas. So I went. I'm like, let's have a look. It was a little Nissan that pulled up, and they pulled a cooler out of the back and emptied it out. I'm like, that's like 15 trout. And then the headline is, there's a plant. Yeah.
Have you been to like Irvine Lake? I was so excited when they opened it, and I'm like, you can't take a boat in. I'm like, okay. But then I heard the first day it was like, there was no one there from DFG. This is what I heard. I don't know. Like, no one was there from DFG. People just had buckets full of
But it's a private lake, right? So you can do
I don't know. I think it's not. I think it's a city ran now.
Okay.
Yeah. So I think it just opened on certain days. I'm not sure. I don't know. I might be speaking out of I don't know. But yeah, I mean, that was my favorite lake because it was right there.
Yeah, but those videos, it's every video I've done, like Clear Lake, as a case in point. I mean, here, let's go back to Paul. Paul moved to Clear Lake, and he did a video of him smashing them on Shag Rock on a HUD. Did you remember that?
I've heard of, yeah.
And now that Shag Rock, that I remember meeting that when I found that spot, I go, it seems like there should be some potential because it's so deep. And I never figured it out. And Paul figured it out. And now it's the most famous spot probably in the swimbait world.
Yeah.
I mean, it's maybe it's died off now because the lake got hurt, but it's coming back. But that spot has got 15 boats fighting over it, when for the last 20 years, there wasn't a soul on it. It was just empty. And
do you feel like that happened with you two on your video?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Laguna, but the people don't know how to fish it. So you put them on it, and they don't know how to fish it. They have no clue.
All that footage was in Laguna then? A lot of it?
A lot of footage was in Laguna. We won the tournament. That bag that we caught 32 pounds of that bag in Laguna within 30 minutes. Pulled into a spot. It was biting. Every fish was over 5 pounds. And then the circus went on where there was an 8 and there's an 8.5 and there's, so there was, I think, 3 8s, 7 and whatever. I don't remember exactly, but it's like that was the most epic bite that I'll ever see. It's like his 27 fish bite, right? It's 27, right? It's the same thing. How many times in your life are you going to go through and see one after the other? The only other time I've seen a bite like that, I was at Benitez, and I was over there with the AC crew and Dave Marciano, and they put me on the spot, and I was throwing surface iron, and I caught like 3 8s, and then we caught a 9, and then there was another fish that was real big 9, and it all happened for 30 minutes, and it was done. It was over.
Yeah.
So that was the only other time in my life. And I mean, think of it. I got thousands of days doing that stuff.
Yeah.
And I seen it twice. So it gets back to everybody's like, well, you fish all the time. I fish all the time, but I don't catch all the time.
Yeah.
You know? You know what I'm saying?
No, I'm the same way. Shit.
And you get some of the guys like Dwayne, he catches every day. He pays attention to detail. The whole thing with fishing is paying attention to detail. So to land big fish, you have to fish for big fish, but you gotta be prepared.
Yeah.
I have a very dear friend of mine, I'm not going to mention his name, called me yesterday, hooked a swordfish off the slide this weekend. Instead of going down and picking the swordfish caster up, which I always have a swordfish caster on the boat somewhere, he wasn't prepared, threw a marlin rig at it, fought for 3 hours, and it broke off.
Sick.
30 pound ain't gonna make it. You know what I'm saying?
I wouldn't even attempt it.
So
my line.
That doesn't work. So it's just like, I guess I get back to it. Prior preparation prevents piss poor performance.
Wow, you and the sayings, dude.
Yeah.
He's got him, dude.
No, but the whole thing about that deal is if you're not prepared to do battle, baby, don't do it.
Yeah.
You can't do it. And then the tuna thing, he was talking earlier about learning himself. I had a friend that he just does not ever want to listen to me because he doesn't want to just think that I know what the hell I'm talking about. So we're flying a kite and we get bit, and it's not on a 50, it's on a 50 wide. So it's got a lot of line. This fish lands behind the boat, and it's the biggest fucker I've seen in a long time. And I'm screaming at him. I go, you got to turn the fucking boat. He goes, what about the kite? I'm like, fuck the kite, turn the boat. And we're trying to get him to turn the boat, but he was so locked in at the kite that this fish pretty much fucking spooled our ass, right? And it wasn't me. If I was driving the boat, it would have been a different deal. And I'm not talking, no names talking, but I was just looking at it where he had to learn the hard way. But unfortunately, I already knew, and I had to learn the hard way again. Right? So I was like looking at it going, God dang it, but those kind of things teach you. I mean, he was talking about how his bite died in the lake, right? Uh-huh. The lakes they're their own environment, whereas the ocean's a continuous moving environment. So when he went to be a pro fisherman, all I did is I started stepping up in size. So my step was, okay, what's next? Mako sharks. And what's next? The thresher sharks. What's next? Back then was big-eye tunas. What's next? Marlins, right? And then I was fortunate. What's next? I caught some swordfish, right? Yeah. So what's next? And you start going. what's next was the yellowfins, and caught some big yellowfins on the Long Ridge. And I started going up at Puerto Vallarta. And then this thing. So I look at, for honestly, right now at your table, I'm stoked to be alive because
what's next? My question is, what's next?
You know what? I'm going to start the circle all over again. And that's one thing that Uncle Al, one of my buddies, has always said. He goes, you start, you don't know shit. You get here, you know a little bit. You get here, you're pretty good. At this point, you're fucking on fire. And then all of a sudden you start sliding down and you're getting ready to start again. And what's the next start? I don't know what the next start, but guess what I've been doing lately? Trout fishing.
Really?
Right.
Yeah.
And I trout fish it all my years, right? I've been doing it forever. But have I ever focused on big trout? No. And he was laughing the other day. I go, what rods do we have for trout fishing? And he's probably shaking his head going, what the fuck is It's time to start something else.
Yeah.
You know what? If you love fishing, don't become a box. Like I'm 360 around. I can see it all. I've got to do everything I ever want to do. I've caught every fish I wanted to. So now I'm going to find something new. And that trout fishing might be it. Doesn't mean I'm going to quit,
doing what you're doing.
Doing what I'm doing. I want to go catch a swordfish on the deep drop. I'm going to go do that. I was supposed to be on the Keakai when Charlie caught 2 of them. But I didn't go because my back's jacked.
Yeah.
So it's one of those deals. But I think if people are going to learn anything from this, have a good time. You have to study fishing like you have to study anything else. So if you're going to go swing a bat and hit a ball, do you have to study that? Yeah, fuck, you got to practice it.
Yeah.
Do we have to do this with fishing? Got to do the same thing or you don't know shit, You can always learn. But if you don't want to learn, expect failure as your friend. Would you say that to be true?
I agree.
How exciting are those awe moments, though, when you figure something out?
Yeah.
It was like me the other day on that silly kite. I was like, oh.
Yeah.
Like this. Like, guys, look at this. Watch this.
And you feel like maybe nowadays people don't take the time to learn like they should.
They don't.
Because of Instagram.
No, you know what? Because of Instagram.
Or even YouTube. I think it's just internet, period.
There's just the info is out there at a fingertip. Why spend the money and the time learning when you can just push YouTube?
That's what's going on right now.
Yeah, and that's great. It's great. It gets them out there. Mm-hmm. I'm an old school guy, and I've had so many of those moments. I'm addicted.
Yeah.
And when you get taught that, it's not the same. Not that I don't listen to everything that my peers say. I mean, I absorb it. I learned something huge from a Chris Martin who I fish with. He taught me a whole different rigging. And I was like, no, my rigging's fine. And he goes, no, but let me show you how I've been doing. I go, my rigging's fine. And then he did his, and I'm like, that's better. That's better. And I used it the other day, and I was like, this is what I got. Yeah. But it wasn't an awe moment because I didn't find that rigging, and that would have been cool. You're like, oh, look what I figured out. And I get addicted to that, and that's why I try to do more myself. It's not ego. It's not. It's that feeling.
You're fishing. You love fishing, but at the same time, you love just as much figuring out how to do what you're doing.
That's what we do, right?
Yeah,
It's all of us. Yeah. I mean, you get your first bite, while you're reeling it in, you're going, his face was facing that way. Yeah.
It's a weird thing, but the one thing is that just because we know something, a lot of times our friends don't know it, and we assume that our friends know it, and they go, well, I just learned this, and you're going, well, yeah, I was doing that too. I've done that for a couple of years now. Why? Because I saw someone make a mistake and do it and fucking get drilled, and you're like, so it's interesting. I think I'm with Matt. I like learning things myself. I don't want people to throw things at me and then me take it without experiencing it. I want to experience everything. Mm-hmm. The kite fishing's been like, I was very fortunate to fish with Keith the Net, and I got down there and learned all about kite fishing in Puerto Vallarta, and you come back here and you see how they skip a kite. Well, we don't skip the kite the same way. Our baits are in the water and their baits are out of the water, and the yellowfins will jump 20 feet out of the water trying to grab a goddamn flyer that's going by there. So to me, there's always like, what do you want to say, the margins. Mm-hmm. So if you can figure out what's best and land right in the margin, or get to a point where you're almost perfect and your margin of error is 0, and you're gonna, so it's I don't know. It's just figuring it out, because once you do something right, there's always a way. Like you just said, I learned how to rig better. There's something that's going to make it better. And in bass fishing, what for us was, we went from, crappy. We didn't have triangle heads. We had bullet heads.
Yeah.
Right? So we went from crappy hooks with really poor hookup ratios to getting chemically sharpened hooks. Point is, braid. When braid came out, Russ Iser gave me some braid and said, this is going to change the industry as we know it. I mean, I got a spool of braid from Russ Iser.
Yeah.
Milt Shedd walked up to me and he goes, you need to listen to him. So I went out and tried it. Guess what? I didn't understand that by my stiff rod for my monofilament, that I put the braid on. I went to Laguna with no leader, throwing straight braid, and hook a fish, bring it to the boat. Back then with straight mono, you fish the tightest drag. There is no drag. It's locked. With braid on there, forget it. I had a fish. He was like a nice fish. He was like 8-9 pounder. It was coming to the boat. He moved a certain way. There was no giving the rod. There was no giving the line. There was no giving the fish, and he popped right off. And Al was in the back of the boat, and Barry was looking at me in the front of the boat. Al goes, spider wire, nothing gets away. And I never forgot that. I turned around and I wanted to beat him to death. I was like, oh my God, I can't believe you just did that to me. But, without learning that, I wouldn't be where I am with braid now. Why? I watch people use top shots all the time. So I don't know if I told you this story, but I went tuna fishing down there, and I was catching tuna on one of the trips down there, and I put a top shot on my rod, which I haven't put a top shot on my rod ever. I don't fish with top shots, right? On a regular tuna rod, we're catching like 40 to 60 pounders. I don't know if you've done that recently, where fish takes off and you put the reel in gear and you come up and set. When you come up and set, you ever realize how much stretch is in that mono?
Yeah.
I can feel it. I'm going, oh my God, because what do I fish?
It's hard to wind on mono.
Yeah. I fish like 3 feet of leader and my knot and my line and my hook, right? And then all of a sudden I'm doing this because our rods are not stiff rods. Our rods are parabolic, and they're designed to be parabolic to put a massive amounts of pressure on the fish and less pressure on you. Well, I'm trying to fish this mono, and I'm like, what is that feel? And I figured out what the feel was. It was the mono. So if people really want to understand it, like this is a perfect thing. It's the same thing we did in that video. We told you how to do it when? Right then. It's all changed, right? With the innovation of braid and the new reels and everything else. But if you wanted to really understand fishing and enjoy fishing even more, is to understand what the reel does, what the line does, what the leader does, and what the rod does. And how, if you get the right stuff all together, how your fishing is more enjoyable. It's less stressful on you. And it's one of those things where you enjoy to pick up your rod. When a rod doesn't weigh anything and the reel's light, the rod's light, and it's got lots of power, and you just make a cast, there's nothing else to say. But then we go out and fish these tunas on the kites, and you got 20 pounds you're lugging around all the time. It's a little bit different of a story.
Yeah. When did you start throwing the surface iron for calicos? Were you throwing it right off the bat, or were you kind of just like, let's try this?
It was right off the bat. We learned it. Yeah. We learned it right off the bat. And then we caught big calicos on the surface iron. And one of the craziest things is we started going to Clemente back then. Like we had boats and we were going to Clemente and fishing Clemente. And Jack Soul was there, and John, you could kick me right in the rear because I can't remember your last name right now. He was there, and what we ended up doing was finding that instead of messing around with swim baits and losing the tails off of swim baits, you could go through and throw surface iron at the islands, and you could catch 100 to 150 fish on a surface iron.
Wow.
And one of the best memories I have is that we did this video, a surface iron fishing at the island or whatever it was. We did it with Michael Fulks, and I threw an iron out, and he said, hey, I got to put your mic on. And I said, okay. So he puts my mic on, my jig hits the bottom. I pick up my rod. I start winding. And then all of a sudden I feel stop. And I'm like, okay. And I keep on winding. Fight this fish up to the boat. And I swear, I mean, it was, I want to say a good one. I'm not going to give you any weights, but it was easily between 9 and 11 pounds.
Wow.
And it was on a surface iron that sank to the bottom.
Dude,
and it's on the video. If you want to watch it, it's on this video. You can see it, me holding it, and Michael Fulks jumping around in circles and stuff. But the whole thing about it was learning how to fish the iron. And now I think I will never have it mastered. Like, I look at Dan Wade as the master of the surface iron, but I don't think anybody masters it. But there's nothing that's more fun than watching a fish track a lure and then turn sideways and smash it. And the yellows do it, the calicos do it, the tuna right now, they're doing it. The surface iron is effective reaction tool, and I think more so with any of that stuff, it's the most visual you could see. It's amazing. Watching a fish track a lure and go, okay, now I'm going to pile on it. So check this out. You know?
Matt knows that, right?
Yeah. For sure.
Oh,
Yeah. That's one thing that I tried last year to kind of throw big baits. And I remember being on the phone with my wife. She was like, when are you coming home? I'm like, in a minute. I've been throwing all day and shit. So I'm on the phone and I'm like, what the fuck is that? So you fucking like at least probably like an 8-pounder following it, you know. I'm like, oh shit, I think I'm gonna get one, you know. And it's just that made the day.
So
that
fun.
made the day.
Yeah.
Like sometimes it's like not catching. Like I went with Charles Tatuna, and he took me to my first time like really big swim bait fishing, and same thing. Saw a lot of followers, which made the day like almost catching.
But that's the first.
Yeah.
That's the first lesson. And then you go back the next day, you know where they followed from.
Yeah.
So you only target those. And then the next day you go, I'm going to target different retrieve and then all of a sudden day 4 or 5, you're like, these things that were just unicorns, I'm playing with them.
Yeah. I'm getting them to come out.
It's
Right?
But
really
see,
cool.
he thinks he thinks the same way I do.
Yeah.
You go to a place, you go in and out, and then you figure out the cadence. You figure out, you know, is it wind and stop? Is it burning it? What is it? You know?
Yeah.
And a lot of time when something's moving a certain direction, not with iron, but more so with the swim bait, if it's moving a certain direction, they're going to follow it. But if you stop and it changes direction, they're going to crush it.
And that's where the glide baits came in. I mean, we were
exactly.
fishing punkers that were so erratic. Well, Bill Siementhal was fishing the tube, and I think that was the first really erratic bait ever.
Really?
But the... I'm going to think of different baits.
Yeah.
No, but it makes sense. And then, were you fishing deep structure a lot too?
The deep structure thing came when I moved to Dana Point and started fishing back, you know, like there's no structure there. So I'd be lazy and not want to go to Dana or go to Laguna or go to Newport. I never fished deep structure in any of those. It was all shallow. And then in Dana, I started learning more about things. And that was because George Clough started telling me hard bottom spots. And you could tell hard bottom on your meter. And once you figure out hard bottom on your meter and you start marking those spots, that's when I figured out deep water structure. And then going to Clemente, that showed me all about deep water structure. Because in Clemente, in different spots, you can get on different places and just drill them in 75, 80 feet of water. You know, going to the deep hole was another one that taught me. When we fished in those tournaments out of Marina del Rey, I'd run up to deep hole, and I had to pre-fish up a deep hole, and you learn a lot of stuff. But when you're fishing in deep water, you can catch yellows, you can catch white sea bass. Like
A lot of sand bass too, right?
Right. Lots of sand bass. I was fishing with Al in an SWA event out of Long Beach, and I was fishing Isers. Right? He caught a 48-pound white sea bass in the middle of this tournament. So we had a limited bass and we had a 48-pound white sea bass in the boat. So I was like, anything's possible. But I think a lot of the stuff that people don't understand is that when you meter stuff, you have to know where your beam is from your transducer, and you have to effectively be able to mark spots. And one of the things that's really helped me a lot with deep water structure, because I do a lot of shallow water rock fishing now and stuff, is that Terra Rova by Minn Kota. I got a Terra Rova 80 or whatever it is, and man, once I hit that on that anchor, God, I mean, I could sit right on places and just bash them.
Yeah.
That thing's amazing. So there's a lot
Just don't get the riptide.
Yeah,
that's what I got. Piece of shit.
Yeah. There's a lot of things.
Bummed me out when they came out with those. I always prided myself on the ability to on offshore
Hold a
fishing.
spot.
I was king at it. I mean, people hated me.
Yeah.
And if you moved a foot, if it was crowded and you drifted a foot, I'll suck that foot up. And I was so good at it. And then when these things come out, absolutely, you can't wait a spot out anymore because they're locked. They're locked. They can retie. They can have lunch. There's going to be no mistakes.
No.
Yeah.
And you just got to leave.
The GPS holds it right in there.
But before you could pull up and you'd see 8 boats, you're like, okay, I just need to get there. And you just start on the outside and steal a foot. And then you're on the zone. Everyone's going, wait, what?
How the fuck did that get in
what
there?
I'm not on the spot anymore. The days are over.
I think a lot with just everything especially with electronics and stuff, fishing's moved way ahead.
Yeah.
Calico Bass fishing with side scan. I mean, there's guys crushing
It's
them
become
now.
so visual. It used to be so mental fishing. You don't know what's going on down there.
Yeah.
So you just
Now you
have to
can see
imagine.
everything,
Now,
right?
I mean, now with the new, some of the Garmin's, I think it is, where you can actually see what kind of fish it is.
Yeah.
Like, that's a pike.
Dude,
You know,
that's
it's
wild,
like-
right? It looks clear as shit. The pictures, I'm like,
Crazy. I saw the guy swimming under the boat the other
Yeah.
day, and you can see his hands.
Yeah.
Palm. You're like, what? This is nuts.
Yeah.
Once they have that, so it can shoot really far forward, this fish is screwed.
Yeah.
Once you
then it's
can,
gonna
you can
take
pull
the-
into a cove.
it's going
and-
to take the fishing out of fishing.
But you know what? Still, the one thing I was just going to say that's super important is that you can have all the shit in the world that you want to find them. You better make sure you know how to rig your shit to catch them.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I laugh at people when we were down there. There was a couple guys down there that were telling me about they were trying 10 different knots. I got a knot. It works. I tie the same knot every time, right?
Yeah.
So
What's your knot?
before I knew it, I had these other guys going, hey, I'm rigging this. Can you tie my knot? And I'm looking at them going, oh, so you want me? So to me, it's like right now we're tying on leaders on the braid, right? So the Pena, the new improved Pena is the only knot I use. But the key to it is taking, knot pullers and wrapping them around the line and popping the knots. And I'll
So,
say it forever.
Knot
popping
pullers,
knots.
because you and Decker talked about knot pullers last time. Dudes asked about that. They're like, what's a knot puller?
Well, knot
Explain
puller,
it.
so you could take 2 sticks. Let's say you take 2 1/4-inch by 5-inch sticks. You take tape, wrap it around there. Then you take, I'm telling you how to make them. Then you go through and you can put heat shrink on them and then take tape and wrap it around there. And then put heat shrink on them again. You got a set of knot pullers. So what you're going to do is you're going to do one at least 3 or 4 times around the braid and never cross the braid. When you're winding it around, they're all separate winds. And you're going to do the same with the floor. Once you get it there, you're going to hold it and you're going to pull with all your might apart and the knot will pop. Once the knot pops, that means it's cinched. Cut your tag lines and off you go. So the key to any of these knots there's a million knots to learn. But for me, the key is one that can hold a lot of pressure because we're fishing small reels. It got lots of pressure on them. But more importantly is that it goes in and out of the guides that you have. So if you're fishing really small guides, you're going to have to figure out a really small knot because Matt and I have talked a lot about that because a lot of times...
Micro guides.
Yeah.
You guys have them on your...
No, they're not micros. They're what I call them semi-micros. They're the micro guides are built on a real flimsy base. I mean, it's tiny and they just fall off. So ours are built like a regular guide, but they are small.
Okay.
They keep them on the Genesis. Actually,
Yeah.
Oh no, Genesis and Airs.
I
are very
like,
small.
what is it? The air is what I like. The air swim
really
bait
small,
rods.
yeah.
Yeah. And my knots fit through there, but I use swim bait rods for saltwater fishing because he has the right actions. And a lot of guys will go, what's up with that? And I use the Bailey swim pretty much. If you ever got on my boat, people are going, are we going bass fishing? I'm like, no, we're going to get the shit out of this other stuff. It doesn't really matter if the rod's right, it's right.
Yeah.
Right? So we've got different, I fish all our Kamana swim bait rods, but sometimes I'll get on these airs, and the airs, I fish the airs a lot of times for smaller baits, for decent fish, and I love them. I mean, the thing is Matt's got the right actions in the rods.
Yeah.
Right? The rod's gonna set the hook, it's gonna give enough parabolic bend so you're putting a lot of pressure on the fish. But the key to fishing at all is to be able to move a fish. If a rod has too much action in it, you won't be able to move the fish. You're screwed. If a rod loads and shuts off at the right deal, you can move the fish, and that's what you're looking for in rods.
Yeah.
And trust me, for me coming back a million years ago when we were Calico Bass fishing really very archaic stuff to now. Yeah. That's a key point.
Yeah. Dropping knowledge bombs again.
Oh, no, it's just, sorry about the knowledge bombs, but it's just, what I try to figure out is make the layman get it. It's like, it's easy to talk above everybody's head, but it's the best thing to do. It's like when I do a seminar, if a guy's got a question, I stop and go, what is the question? Because you know what? One guy asks a question, then there's 10 guys thinking the same thing.
Of course.
It's time to get everybody on the same thing. And then like, hey, when we're done talking, we'll come over here and we'll do whatever we need to do.
Yeah.
But I could tell you honestly with knots, if you have a knot and it works, I use uni knots almost all the time. I use uni knots on almost everything I do, except for maybe on the kite when I'm putting the swivels on my big rod. I use a San Diego Jam, double San Diego Jam or something. But other than that, I use a uni knot all the time.
Really?
Trout fishing, if we're fishing for bass, whatever it is, I use the same knots because I believe that those knots are the best, and I don't lose fish. I don't have big knots.
What about you? What's your knot?
I'm so bad with names because
I don't know
so
the
many
names of them
names.
either.
5 up, 5 down. What's that?
5 up, 5 down.
It's like
that's on the leader.
Oh yeah, on the leader knot.
I thought it was 7.
No.
I've been doing 7.
He's tying an improved Albright.
I'm doing 7 up on mine too. Yeah.
5 up, 5 down, back through the way you came.
Yeah.
Everyone, there's like 15
I
names
do that
now.
one.
Yeah.
And then my regular knot I used is for hooks on freshwater.
Yeah.
Trilene.
Yeah.
Not even the improved one. Regular trilene. It wins the knot wars all the time.
What's the one that goes up, down, I think 7, and then back through?
That sounds like a San Diego.
No, that's
a trilene.
That's a
That's a
trilene.
great. I just started. I used to do polymer all the time.
Yeah.
That's all I did.
So get this. My dad taught me a knot in 1964. It was 2 through the eye, up, turn it, go back through both the circles and pull it down. My dad tied the first trilene knot in 1964, and he learned it in Pennsylvania. So people go, this is a trilene knot. I'm like, no, that's Ben Seacrest Sr. knot, man. I don't know what you're talking, but he tied that knot forever, but with the uni knots, I think Stoats got me on the uni knots. Because with the uni knot, I can tie it in heavy line, a light line, I can tie it wherever.
I found a knot. Talking about knots. Lepresti did a video. I just fumbled. I wasn't even looking for knots. I found it, and Lepresti did a video on this knot that a customer had fought a fish for 5 hours on light line, got it in, and he was like, "That's the smallest knot in the world." So I learned how to tie it, and I tie it now on all my saltwater hooks.
Oh, really?
And it's you go through the eye once, and then go right back again, and then you wrap those two together. Done. And it's tiniest knot, so that it allows the bait to swim without a big knot. Never failed on me.
Wow.
Lepresti was ranting and raving about it.
Too bad we don't know the names of all these knots.
I'm so bad. Trilene, knot, Palomar. About the only two I'm secure on.
Yeah, those are the ones that I used to. Oh, man, that's great. Well, this has been another great one, man. We did a really long podcast today. I appreciate both you guys coming out.
Awesome.
Thanks again, Ben. I hope the surgery goes well, man. You're back on the water soon.
Thanks. October 8th, baby.
Yeah. He's going to be bionic, man. He's going to come back and outfish everyone.
Yeah, I doubt that. I'll probably up in the Sierras trying to catch a brown trout.
Trout rod's coming soon.
Thanks again, guys, for coming on. I appreciate you taking the time down to come down.
Thanks, brother.
All right. Take care, guys. Bye.